Hello and welcome. Welcome to Moxie Journal. My name is Calyx and I'm really glad you're here with me today. I am going to be answering a tag by the Greeneyed Tarot. Kristy. Her name is Kristy at the Greeneyed Tarot. This tarot is called Tarot for the Senses. And I thought it was fascinating. What a great way to look at decks. And so there are 8 prompts plus sort of 2 bonus ones. She actually goes through 8 different systems with a bonus sensory system. And then there was an extra one that was like all of the above. So, and I had to start off with this little jeweled bird here. He is from my Louise Hay affirmation deck, and I just thought he was so perfect because look at all those little colors. I just think he looks delicious and cute and sweet. And also it says, I fulfill my creative side. I want to bloom wherever I am planted. So creativity and blooming and growing and earthy, and anyway, all of that just seemed very sensory to me. So I thought I would share, and in case you needed that affirmation too. So as I said, there are 9 prompts, and I've got a whole little cheat sheet here. Sight and sound and smell and touch and taste, and then vestibular, which is about balance, and proprioception, which is about movement, interoception, which is about feeling grounded, your perception inside your body, and then the bonus one is chronoception, which is about either a deck that takes you out of time or something to do with how you interpret timing in your readings. So I thought I would start. The very first one is sight, and that's visual. And so this one is a deck that is usually, that is visually stimulating, or perhaps a deck that overstimulates you due to too much in the cards. And I do like the way Kristy did this. She's clearly an educator, just as part of her way of being in the world, because she talked about sort of what these sensory systems were and about her work with small children, I think, on these. And I love starting with the sight because I'm very visually oriented. And I think what I was going to say is that she talks about both sides of it, something that attracts you visually or maybe that you're averse to. So, whether it's over or under stimulating for any of these sensory systems, and I thought was interesting. And so here's just a little background. This is my deck. This is the Tarot Gallimaufry by Lisa McLaughlin. But what I want to say is that I am often thinking about sensory issues because I have a lot of sensory issues. I am a neurospicy person, which I didn't know until I was in my mid-40s, even though I have a lot of children and all of them have sensory and spectrum issues, and they're different bits of the neurospicy salad bar. And I don't know why it didn't occur to me I do know why it didn't occur to me, because I was a girl and my neurospiciness doesn't look like my children. I have a lot of boy children and it's just different. And so even though I read all of the books at the time, my kids are in their 30s, late 20s and 30s. So research has just changed, right? So we know a lot more about what it looks like. So I think it's really interesting to explore sensory things with tarot. In fact, I think it's pretty much fun to explore anything through the lens of tarot, because I am a special interest activated form of tarot decks, and so I like looking at things through tarot. So for the visual cue here, the visual prompt, it says a deck that is visually stimulating or a deck that overstimulates you due to too much in the cards. And so for me, I love this deck. This is one of my very favorite decks, and it is perfect stimulating for me. But I have heard other people say that it is overstimulating because of how much is going on in the cards. Now, these are very big cards. I don't know if you can see. I don't have tiny hands. I don't have large hands. I just have sort of medium-sized hands. But these cards are they're very big. Like I shuffle them, kind of just mixing them up, and whatever this is called, when you do when you do this. But as you can kind of see, if you fan these out, right, there are lots of colors, there are lots of sharp shapes and curvy shapes. And so I think as a whole deck, this could definitely be overwhelming for somebody. For me, and I think this is sort of part of my sensory stuff, is that this actually calms me down to see this much going on. It lets me detach a little bit. Sometimes when things are too blank, that is more anxiety provoking for me. I think because my brain is trying to find something to attach to, something to interpret, and when it has a lot, then it gets really busy. That said, I don't do big readings with these cards. I tend to use these cards as a 1 card, or maybe a 2 card kind of sentence to kind of look at how they interact. I often have these on my altar card. These on my altar, these cards are amazing for meditation. Like, you can, especially with the guidebook, again, these don't follow the any of the traditional Smith Waite imagery, but they have lots of botanicals. It's all botanicals and animals, and there are it's collaged and then layered and then visually scanned, and then she's done some more layering. So there are all kinds of things. And when you read the guidebook, right, like here's like a little crab, and then here's maybe a mushroom. Again, I haven't memorized all of these. And then a little fern kind of thing. I don't know, this is maybe an amoeba, and then this butterfly. So there is a lot going on in each of the cards. And yet for me, this is very soothing to meditate on, to think about, to look at, to dive deeper. But this is a deep dive visual deck. Again, that is the Tarot Gallimaufry. It is a out of print deck, so I'm sorry if that is upsetting. I know that some people have a hard time when out of print decks are shown, and that's my only one that I know of that's out of print. I think it's in fact my only independent deck. No, I have two others that are both available. But for me, actually, sometimes it's nice to see a deck that is out of print, because then I can just enjoy it in the video and I don't have to think about obtaining it for myself. I don't know if you feel that way. The next one, okay, so the next prompt is actually the sound prompt, the auditory, and I'm going to skip that one and come back to it, because I actually have my brand of neurospiciness is actually that I have a severe auditory processing issue. I've had my ears tested, my hearing tested like a dozen times in my life, because I thought I just couldn't hear, but my hearing is actually perfect. It's my processing. My brain just refuses to process about 25% of any auditory signal coming in, which is maybe why my visual is so hyped, because it's had to take over, right? So when you can't hear, but about 3/4 of any incoming auditory signal, in order to figure out what's going on, you have to really look around and see things. So the prompt for the sound for the second one says, a deck that provides an ASMR-like experience, or a deck that sounds pleasing when shuffled and used. And I honestly, the ASMR stuff kind of squeaks me out a little bit, like when people take cards and scrape them against each other. Although I'll show you when we get to my tactile deck that I love shuffling that one. And I guess the sound is kind of part of it, but I'm not going to take it out and just scratch the cards against each other. So we're skipping on to number 3, and this is smell. And this deck is the Nikki de Saint-Phal. She's an artist. She has passed, I think she passed in 2015, maybe a little earlier than that. Anyway, she's one of my favorite artists, and she did a, oh, I think I just bumped the microphone, sorry. And she did a tarot sculpture garden in Tuscany, which is on my list of places to go to, pilgrimage. So I have ordered her, at Christmas, I ordered her tarot deck, and this is her style of art, and these are all sculptures in her tarot sculpture garden, and they are fascinating life-sized sculptures. And when I say life-size, I mean even bigger than life-size. Like, she lived in the building of the sculpture for the Empress that was like an apartment. This one is so big that you can, like, this is a human-sized door to walk in, and these are windows to look out of, and she lived in there as she was building the rest of the garden. So the reason this comes under the olfactory, the sense of smell, is because when I received it in December, and I don't know if it was just particularly rainy or whatever, but there was like a damp, possibly mildew smell, maybe not that intense, scent to the deck when I got it on the cards. And so I actually took one of these little, this is from my Hobonichi planner. It's a little like anti-mold sticker, and I stuck it in the box with the with my cards when I got them. I aired them out. I put them in sunshine. Actually, I put them in sunshine. I put them in moonshine. I mean, the light of the moon, not, I'm from the South, so moonshine is actually liquid, and I would not do that. Anyway, I set them out and cleared them. I could still scent it, and I couldn't actually know if I was imagining it. So I put that little anti-mold sticker from that had arrived with my planner. And then I also put, and I took it out, but I have some tea bags with this hot cinnamon spice tea from Harney & Sons that I love. And I just kind of set it in there like little sachets. And so now these cards, they smell like hot cinnamon tea. And so it went from being something negative to being something positive for me. And they're cleared and wonderful. And so I love this deck, but it definitely has a scent when I use it. So that is my prompt number 3, the olfactory. So for number 4 is the touch, the tactile deck. And this is the one where I'm going to kind of add in the sounds, because the sound of this deck is pleasing to me. But this is, this deck for me is the Magical Nature Tarot by the Sync Spirit Collective. And this deck is on eco herbage paper, and I mean, it just spreads beautifully. It's fun to touch. It's really thin, wobbly paper, but it like really holds its shape. Like, it's just, I mean, you can do all kinds of, really, it's just fun to just touch. I love this deck. In fact, when I am sitting and watching your videos, I often have this in my hands, just touching it, just holding it, and then shuffling it. Now, I'm not a very good shuffler. I love to shuffle, but I'm not super good at it. So, you know, I'm not like going to be trying to get a job in Vegas or anything anytime soon. And that big thump was my calendar tipping over. It wasn't anything to do with my deck, but these are able to be riffle shuffled. You can do them like this. See, that sound is okay for me. I don't mind that sound. It's a little bit calming. So this is definitely my favorite tactile deck. It is an indie deck. It's still available. And I will tell you that the other thing, this card, you can see mine is just a little bit discolored. This is an alternative card, the 4 of Wands. So Jory, who is who I interacted with from the Sync Collective, who this was included, and they were so great when I interacted with them about this. The original 4 of Wands card that was in the deck, that was with the same printed die lot, had 4 cups clinking and cheering, and I could have worked with that, except I am a 6-month sober person, almost 7 months, and for me, having this 4 of Wands was absolutely perfect. And if you all have ever done any knitting or dyeing, you'll know that dye lots are a thing, and you don't always get it perfect. And so this one is slightly different. These cards are all made from materials found in the earth. The Sync Collective worked with plant and metal collaborators, this is what they said, which are different metals, different plants, different earth materials to make the dyes, to make the paper, to make all of these images. And I just love that. It just makes me just want to touch. And so that is my tactile deck with a little nod to the auditory. And then the 5th prompt is the gustatory, or a sense of taste. And this is a deck that evokes a certain taste, or a deck featuring food. Now, I don't think I have any decks that feature food. So mine here for this prompt is going to be the Peculiar Pathways Tarot by Lennox Reese. And the reason for that is when I first, and this one is actually Can I interrupt myself more times? But y'all, this is how my brain works, right? I get partway through and then I want to go back and give you some more context and then I loop back around. So here we go. Let's try this again. The Peculiar Pathways Tarot by Lennox Reese. So it is definitely my gustatory, my taste, because when I open this box, I'm going to tell you that my mouth is going to have like this certain feel. I can almost taste this, but I'm going to say there is actually a runner-up that we've already seen. And so this, my first deck, The Secret of the Wild Wind, this deck always makes me think of rainbow sprinkles. So like vanilla ice cream with all those yummy, delicious, bright colored, fanciful rainbow sprinkles. That is definitely... But you know, what's weird is the rainbow sprinkles don't actually have a lot of flavor in and of themselves, right? And I'm talking about just the sprinkles, not the ones that are chocolate, because I'm actually sensitive to chocolate. I can eat it, but I have a little bit of a problem with it. Like it gives me a headache and it makes me feel bad, which is going to make this next piece even funnier, because when I open this deck, oh, of course I open it backwards. This deck, I just love that Hermit card. That is just, it's my favorite Hermit card, but that's not what I'm going to tell you about. The back of this deck, isn't it beautiful? Like, these are so not my colors, but I love them anyway, with these great sort of sage green edges. This deck for me also fits in the tactile space, not because of how it feels. I mean, it's a lovely deck. I mean, it shuffles fine. But because when I first saw this, I immediately thought of like quirky grandmother's crocheted Afghan, like out of granny squares. Like just the shape of this, I could almost just feel the bumps and feel that cozy. This is like cozy, quirky grandma vibe. And on top of that, for me, that association is hot chocolate. Like, so the minute I opened this deck, I started tasting hot chocolate. And this, I have synesthesia, so often particular colors or color combinations have particular taste for me. Synesthesia is where your brain kind of mixes up some of your senses. They're a little bit cross-wired. So if they get kind of close enough in a certain way, then it triggers I don't know, another memory or association or meaning. And this is one of those it looks like hot chocolate taste to me, but not just any hot chocolate. This is like if the quirky grandmother who loves you very much spiked your hot chocolate with peppermint schnapps. That is this deck. And it's mostly the backs. The fronts are, I mean, I just love this deck. I have been welcoming this deck in. I love the colors kind of in the background, and then in the foreground, the focal image is black and white. And the guidebook on this is fantastic. It's a PDF, it's not printed. And the guidebook gives you this image side by side with the Rider-Waite-Smith and points out the different elements and where they've made changes and why. And then gives you, at the top, it gives you some keywords. It's wonderful. It's one of my favorite guidebooks, although I do wish it was printed. Of course, I could just go print it myself, but I like that people are being conscious of how much paper we are using and to let you make an intentional choice, because you don't have to use the guidebook. This totally reads, right? If you looked at this, the Hermit, you've got the light, but I love that Lennox explains in the guidebook about why this is set in a swamp with alligators as opposed to the like craggy mountain cold of the Hermit up in the mountains. All right, let me put this over to the side. That was my, making all that noise, see? Right, like I don't watch unboxing videos a lot because when people unwrap things and all that crinkly, rippy sound, it actually can make me queasy. So, yeah. Let's see, what were we on? So we just did taste, and that was that peppermint schnapps spiked hot cocoa. And we are on Vestibular. Oh, this one is great. This one is a deck that helps to make you feel balanced. So this deck for me is the Illuminated Earth Oracle by Claire Mack. This is an independent deck. It's available. Just look up Claire Mack. I think it's just clairemack.com. But anyway, you could find it. And this deck is so balanced and earthy, and it definitely makes me feel grounded. Just the backs are very with the sacred geometry. And this deck, I guess I could show you more cards instead of just talking about the overall pieces of it. But this deck just has such a, I've got some upside down, doesn't really matter. Yeah, this deck I can just get lost in. When I get a little icky squicky on something else, this is a deck I can pull out. There aren't a lot of people in it, but the ones that are totally fine for me. I think one of the issues for me is with a brain like mine, particularly with the auditory processing. When I went in for testing, yeah, I scored in the 0.2%, like as in single digit 2 percentile of people who have the ability to process auditory signal. Like 98% of the people out there process auditory signal better than I do. And that was a little hard for me. I was one of those nerdy little kids who always tested in the 98th percentile for good things, for potential and studying and reading and writing and all that stuff. I mean, I was just one of those kind of kids. So to score not just in the bottom half, but in like the bottom of the bottom decile was really hard. Although it did explain a lot. And it's one of those things that the more stressed I get, the less I can hear. Again, not a survival positive trait, really, to have your ears turn off. And that's what I used to say. I said, you know what, my ears turn off when I get upset. And my doctor said, yeah. And I'm in my mid-40s. And she said, you are exactly right. That's exactly what happened. But what happens is my visual signal takes over. So when they did a corresponding test about facial expressions, I tested off the charts. In fact, they stopped the test early. They said you could just keep going, but you couldn't get a higher score on this. You're at the top. You haven't missed anything. So facial expressions, my body, my brain really reads and recognizes, which I think makes it hard for me sometimes to have a lot of people or a lot of facial expressions in a tarot deck or in an oracle deck, because they get such high priority. It's like my brain focuses all the resources on them, and that can be really distracting and difficult and really intense, right? Can make the experience very tense, all the faces. But this deck, even with the faces that are in here, are very informative and balanced, and they are grounding for me. They do not, they are not difficult for me. I love this deck. So again, this is my deck that I feel balanced with. All right, so I'm gonna try and not make too much of that scrapey noise when I put it together. Although these cards are pretty nice. They're a little thick, they're a little stiffer. They're not super easy to shuffle. They do shuffle, but they're not super easy to do that with. So that was the Illuminated Earth Oracle by Claire Meck. All right, our next sensory system is an interesting one which you may not have heard of, called proprioception. And I actually learned this word from my friend Savannah just in November, so it was very fun. I actually had to text her and send her Kristy's video and said proprioception. So this is a deck with a lot of movement, or a deck with interesting perspectives. And so I actually have two decks for this one. So the first one I'm going to do is the perspective one, because this deck, and honestly, this one could have been the grounding deck. So this for me is the Tarot of the Abyss by Anna Turian. And this deck, and actually this deck could have hit for me for the balanced and grounding deck too, because when I get kind of out there, when I've been working with colors or kind of a lot, coming back to this deck because it's in black and white, I guess technically black and white, but I always think of it as like this parchment and white. It's very soothing. It's very balanced. Now, I will tell you, this is a deck that probably shouldn't work for me because it has a lot of faces, and it particularly has a lot of faces that are interacting with you, that are engaging, which in a lot of decks doesn't work for me. For example, in the Light Seers Tarot, there are about 6 cards in there that just make me want to punch somebody, particularly the like character in the on the card, like the knights in that card. I just want to. But this deck, for whatever reason, the faces really are just fine for me. It's so it could have worked as the balancing, but I put it in the perspective because this deck has some fascinating perspective. So I pulled out some cards just at the top to look at. I mean, the artwork in this is incredible. It's so well thought out. If you haven't seen this deck, it's truly wonderful. It's these line drawings. The guidebook is wonderful. Again, there's that emperor that's on the cover. But in terms of perspective, it has some of my favorite cards. For instance, this is the Hanged One. And if you look at this, like, it's fascinating, right? These birds are upside down. And when you switch the perspective, right? So, and the Hanged One is about shifting perspective. It's about sacrifice. It's about voluntarily going into a different state of perception in order to get that knowledge to move on. So I just think this one is super cool. It's a great kind of take on that. The next one, this is my favorite 3 of Wands ever. I love this because if you look at it, and I'm trying to hold it really still, but you can see this ship, it is either coming in or setting sail, right? It is arriving and departing depending on how you look at it. So it can look like it's going away from you. It can look like it's coming towards you. I think this is just a masterfully done card, the 3 of Wands. Either way, you are focused on it, right? This you as the character here in the part of this story, you are focused on that. So I love that card. I also really appreciate this Lovers card. I just personally have an issue with the Lovers card because I'm not a traditional person. I'm not a conventional person. I'm not in a conventional romantic relationship. So often I have to kind of tell myself, okay, the word for lovers, I can call it partnership. I don't, I have read versions where it can be just in a relationship with yourself, and then it's a soul deep connection, and I love that too. And I mean I can work with it, but I don't often just really enjoy the card itself. But this imagery about this true twining here, growing in and around, and having your roots mix in together to sustain and support each other, or this could be read as one tree with different parts sustaining and supporting, again, bending, arranging, responding to the elements. I love this card. I also love, again, because the way I'm not conventional is I am in a polyamorous relationship. Now we're fully established. We've been together for 20 years, the 3 of us. So I would love it if there were another, root there. But one thing we know about trees, think of things like aspens, is that they can be separated by miles, but their root systems go underground and they're connected and they support, and they are, some botanists wonder if maybe they are all one tree, even if it's a grove miles and miles apart. So I think that's a fascinating look. So I appreciate the perspective of this Lovers card. And this Tower, I love this too, right? And I've seen versions that are similar to this, but I like it. There's a lot going on in this card. And then the Justice card. If you've seen this deck, you've probably been shown this card. This is actually the card that made me want to buy this deck. I have a hard time with eyes and eyeball things, but in this particular image, I love that the Justice, that her eye or their eye has the scales. The scales of justice are in their sight. So this card is amazing. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that this deck comes with, let me put these out, comes with some alternative cards. Maybe can I try and put this like this and this? Sort of depending on how you like to read. I don't know if the glare is working on those. Maybe if I come back a little bit. Okay, so the Three of Swords and the Ten of Swords. So, and I have them like this. So the ones on the left are the more traditional type of interpretation, right? So the Three of Swords here, the sort of broken heart here in the shape of the bird and the coming here. So it's that lesson, that loss or heartbreak that that leads you to the lesson. Or if you interpret it more numerologically and prefer to read it differently without the heartbreak part, you've got this Three of Swords where you used to have all the, let me see if I can pull this up closer. So you can see here's the learning, here are the swords kind of stabbing into the book with all this knowledge coming out and taking flight. And you know, you've got the open mind, again, kind of focusing more on that intellectual, mental side of the swords, which I think is fascinating. And then the Ten of Swords, which is for me, oh, this card. I get this card all the time. And I've been studying tarot for a long time, but I have only been practicing for a little while, like 6 months, 5 months maybe. And the Ten of Swords, the first time it would come up and I'd look it up and it would say ruin, betrayal, you know, just all this destruction. And I was like, what? Like it didn't ever quite fit. So as I've done more, as I've read more, and it didn't sort of match to me with the way the tens are sort of conceptually in terms of being the end of the journey through the minor arcana. And, you know, that I read melodrama. I'm like, well, okay, maybe melodrama. And, you know, there's definitely, I mean, there's an ending and, you know, this person walking by doesn't seem too concerned and, you know, maybe it's overkill, all those kinds of things. But this card with this sort of elder figure here, you've got the wisdom, you've got the, you know, all the swords here. This one captures just that culmination of all the learning, of maybe the release part more of so again, I can make it work from any of them, but I appreciate that this deck, that Anatolian offers other alternative perspectives. So this is my answer to the perspective piece of that, proprioception, but in a more physical sense, my second deck, and this is Tarot, Witch Sister Tarot, and I don't have it in its box. Hold me, here's the box over here. I'm using this box as a study one, so I just have a bunch of other stuff in the box. But this is Witch Sister Tarot by Julia Jeffrey. And for me, this was the deck that came to mind with proprioception, not so much in perspectives, but in the deck with movement. This deck has so much movement. The backgrounds are kind of swirly. There's a lot of energy. The figures are sinuous. They have curly hair that's interacting with the elements, with the wind, with the sky. Even when you're looking down, right, for stones, right, this is pretty static, and yet with those curves, with the light, there's so much movement in almost all of these cards, with the shape of them, with the energy interacting here. There's just visual movement. Like this Ace of Waters, this amphibian, he looks like he could just jump in that water that's rippled and moving. We've got the Maid of Trees, crossed arms. Like these characters are practicing their craft. They are moving through the world. They're looking back over their shoulders. They're swimming. They're this Queen of Trees, she has a really long, like Keira Knightley kind of neck. They're holding things up. I just love this deck. They're looking in different directions, so your eye is just moving. Even this tattoo here, right? This tattoo, which is a stationary thing, looks like it is just sliding and guiding. There's a lot of flight in this deck to me. And right, so this deck just had to be in proprioception for movement. Even with the tradition, right, you can see the lineage, you can just see it stretching back and back, those generations moving through this shamanic figure here and into the world. This tree is probably one of the most stationary images, and still it's got ripples. It's reaching into the world. So if you are looking for a deck that will have you flying or floating or swimming or even just dynamically standing and grounding, this is a wonderful deck. I love this Ten of Waters. So this is my favorite. This is my favorite world card ever, the world as the land. In fact, for my study, for my, oops, let me put this down. For my study deck, I actually blew that image up and put this on the cover of my notebook. It's actually a Hobonichi planner that I'm using. So for this deck study, and I love that image. I might have to get that framed and have it up in my altar space. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but I won't. I'll gather this one up and I'll go through the next couple of decks. We've only got, we're at proprioceptions. We're on the prompt number 8. And this 8th prompt is interoception. So this is a deck that makes you feel grounded in your body. Excuse me. I knocked my microphone again, so sorry if I keep brushing up against it. Let me start over with that one. Interoception is a deck that makes you feel grounded in your body or helps you to perceive your own body, or a deck that is body positive in its imagery. And I think maybe Kristy used this deck. I'm not really sure. I've watched a couple, so maybe it was Shanna who used this deck for this tag, but I just think this one is perfect. This is the 5th Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess. And I put the people cards kind of up at the top, and we can just go through the people cards. Here's some more. Okay. But the people, the representation in this deck is amazing. And that's just one of Charlie Claire Burgess's missions, and the way they are is that they've created this inclusive, wonderful deck. But, and I love this Page of Wands. This picture reminds me of a specific famous person. I won't say it because I don't want to put that in your head and have you unsee it, but it's a wonderful association that's perfect for me with this. And I just love all of the different types of people. I particularly love the roller skates. I'm a roller skating girl. And I love all the wheels and all the shapes, right? We have an emperor with breasts, so maybe a trans person. I love the folds in the bodies and just the different shapes. I like that there are slim people and round people and androgynous folks and gendered folks and non-gendered folks. And I love just all of the different skin tones and the age representation. And this deck, seeing this many different types of people. Again, I do love the roller derby. I don't do roller derby. I just skate. But I love moving my body through space on wheels. So this deck is just wonderful in terms of representation, inclusivity. And the more different types of people that I meet and see represented and see honored and valued, the safer and better and grounded I feel in being exactly who I am, with all of my shapes and scars and weirdness and special kind of beauty in this world. So for me, I love that this deck is out there. I don't have the Gay Marseille. I don't have any Marseille decks, but it's on my list, I think. Not necessarily to read Marseille, because honestly, I don't need to be activated on yet another type, but I love that it's out there. I've seen the pictures, and I may just have to get it because I want to support Charlie Claire Burgess. So again, I love all of these different versions of people in here. Yeah, see, this is going to be that sort of scrapey sound. Oh. I don't mind the thump. I kind of like percussive things, right? So auditorily, like that works for me. But the scrapey cards on cards is not my favorite. Okay, hammered that one enough. Let's put that aside. And then, so that's all 8. But there's a bonus one, which is a deck that engages all or most of your sensory systems. And there was actually a 9th one that she mentioned at the very end, which is a deck that takes you out of time or has something to do with timing or how you interpret timing in your readings. And, oh shoot, I didn't actually pull this deck out. Let me grab it. So the timing, which is the chronoception, this little Northern Animal Tarot by Wilder Hearts Studio, this deck actually comes with, and I'm sure that there are decks that have a lot of timing kind of moon things or astrological things. I don't actually have a lot of zodiac decks, but this one came with some, and I'm sorry I didn't pull these out. It came with some extra bonus cards. It was this one, wasn't it? That star, it's so sweet. With some moon cards. Where are they? I mean, that's the moon, but there are some specific. Okay, here we go. There's one. So that's the dark moon. Oh, come on. There are all the moon phases somewhere in this. Okay, that is actually the blood moon, also known as a lunar eclipse. And there's a full moon somewhere in here too. I just love the storybook imagery in this one. But I noticed what was interesting about this deck for me is that when I did the intake interview or the welcome aboard interview or the bonding interview, however you want to call it, when I did it with this deck, the first time I was kind of scattered and I was kind of fitting it in. I had said I would to myself, nobody else cares but me. I had said, oh, I would get that done. Oh, here we go. Here's the crescent moon. And here's the quarter moon, and I didn't have the full moon yet. And anyway, and I was kind of distracted, and I just did the reading just to kind of get it done. There we go. To pull it in, and I had a terrible reading. I mean, well, terrible in that it just was jarring, and so I was like, oh gosh, that's. Like when I asked the deck what personality it had, said the devil, and it says, you know, how are we going to work together? And it was, well, hold on, let's look at it real quick. This is the last one. Where did that go? Okay, here it is. I got the devil, death. Like, how are we going to work together? Death. And I'm like, well, I could sort of work with that, but this was jarring. It hadn't seemed to fit the personality of what I expected the deck to be when I'd kind of done a little art and a little just kind of looking at the cards and talking to them. So I kind of took this death card as a, hey, lady, start over. This isn't really right. So I redid it, and both times when I had the 5th question in my spread is, when should I call on you for guidance? And the first time, the answer was at the full moon. And the second time I did a reading with these cards, with the ghost is kind of cute, isn't he? The star, but with these moon cards all mixed in just to the regular. What did I do with the full moon? Well, I just had it. Anyway, you saw it. Oh, there it is. I got 2 different on the 5th question, and they're the only ones of these cards I got in any of the readings I've done with this deck, and I got them both in this position of timing. So about when should I call on you? So I thought that was interesting. I thought that was very interesting. So I think that to answer that chronoception, this deck, the Northern Animal Tarot, would be it. All right, so that, and then I am going to do one last bonus, which is the deck, a deck that ties them all in, you know, like D, all of the above. And for me, the deck that actually kind of hits all of these senses is the Sacred Destiny Oracle by Denise Linn. And this deck, let me get the cards out. This deck is a really interesting deck, but the backs of them are this ocean crashing ocean scene. And for me, when I look at this, I can feel the sun on my face. I can feel the wind. I can actually, because of this foamy froth, I can taste the salt. And one of the things about when I'm at the ocean, from when I was a little kid, so I learned to swim like literally in the Pacific, not in a swimming pool. I learned to swim in the Pacific. And we would spend all day at the beach in the water, and it's very salty. And when I was a kid, it was the only time I was ever allowed to have candy was at the beach and with my grandparents. And so I would get Jolly Ranchers. They were just little hard candies. If you don't know what Jolly Ranchers are, these really, really hard candies that are super sweet. But if you eat a Jolly Rancher while you're playing out in the waves, that sweetness like neutralizes all the salty, and it doesn't make you quite so thirsty, which meant we could stay out in the water longer, which was my whole goal. I mean, I think I'm part mermaid. So for me, this has like the sight, the sound, the taste, and that's just on the back. And then you get to the cards themselves on the front side, and like I can almost just smell this meadow here, right? Again, you can kind of feel the atmosphere. And with this waterfall, there is for me a sense of time passing. There are a lot of cards that have sort of this movement, and I don't really love that card, but this deck, it hits all of the sensory pieces for me, except maybe sound, right? I don't get very many auditory clues. I mean, maybe if I sat and imagined I could, hear one of these birds calling. And while I don't like to shuffle it, I do actually really love the feel of these cards. They're very smooth. If I close my eyes, they're almost like satin, but they're not, you can see they're not glossy. Again, I'm not going to scrape them together, but look at this flow card. And it invites me in. So that perspective, that pulling me in, that movement. Anyway, I think this Oracle deck has it all. So my friend, thank you so much for being here with me, for walking through these decks. I can't wait to see other people's tags on this. I'm very interested in sensory stuff. And particularly if you have any senses that are maybe a little crisscrossed, I'd love to hear about that. Let me know in the comments. Sometimes I do feel, I don't know, kind of alone sometimes with the sensory stuff, because some things that delight other people absolutely just make me want to retreat in my cave and never come out again. So yeah, thank you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.